Hello, welcome back to the InsTech podcast. Zoya here. Keen podcast listeners will be aware of Cent Technology, a company helping commercial and specialty insurers transform underwriting with AI-enabled tools. On their third feature on the podcast over the years, joining Matthew is Matt McGrillis, co-founder and chief product officer at Send. He's here to talk about how the company has evolved from an early-stage startup to one of the UK's leading underwriting workbench platforms, and why their latest focus on agentic workflows and AI-enabled triage is redefining how underwriters prioritize and process submissions. If you're curious about how AI agents are being quietly embedded into core workflows and what it takes to digitize decades-old underwriting practices, then this episode is for you. Now let's dive into the conversation.
Matt, welcome. It's a real pleasure to talk to you as one of the co-founders of Send, not only because I've spoken to your other colleagues, because I'm really looking forward to catching up with what's going on. Welcome.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. The third of three.
Well, there is a lunch riding on whoever gets the most listeners. They're all worth listening to because it's quite a good story of how Send's evolved over the years. So Ben Huckle, April 2022, 1,400 downloads. Andy Moss, CEO, June 2023. He has got 1,200 downloads, but obviously it was a year later. And then Matt, you are Chief Product Officer, co-founder, and that's your target to beat for the next, so I'll give you 12 months and then we can decide who buys lunch.
Definitely. Like and subscribe and download, everyone. I don't want to be buying lunch.
Well, top tip, actually, if you don't already do this, anybody who wants to look for a job with Send is to encourage them to listen to the podcast.
Yes, it could be bribery, but I like it.
Let's talk a little bit about Send. So you were founded back in 2017, that's 8 years ago. Three of you had all been working in technology and insurance before that. You're, I would not say my favorite kind of entrepreneurs, but you were the kind I almost call accidental entrepreneurs. You had a problem, or you saw a problem, you thought, right, we can build a solution to fix it. And you did. And your first client, who I think we can now talk about, I can talk about because somebody mentioned on the podcast, was Aviva, which is a fantastic story coming out of startup mode, build a business. And then I'm going to quote back to you, or quote back to somebody listening, what you do. So you're a single platform designed to manage underwriting process for submissions to bind and beyond. I quite like that, and beyond bit. Is there anything else I've missed in terms of the business that you want to add in there, Matt, before we go on?
To boil it down, it's all about allowing and enabling our customers to write better, more profitable business faster. So it is, imagine a digital platform where it will give an underwriter everything that they need to make the complex decisions that they need to make, as well as automating as much as possible.
So how close is what you're doing now, in the way you've described it, to what the original thinking was when you founded the company 8 years ago?
Well, I guess probably when you spoke to Ben and Andy and you mentioned Aviva, they were our first customer. We're very proud of that. And people, I guess, knew us for, we built an underwriting workbench for insurance. So, commercial, specialty, P&C insurance. But since then, we've really expanded in terms of what we do. A big part of what we do, as well as still being that digital platform for insurance, we've also moved into delegated insurance and reinsurance and have a full stack MGA platform. So it's all slightly different workflows and variations around the same key data model. In terms of Send itself, we've grown up since those early days of 2017. I think we're probably around 120 headcount. We're expanded into a few regions, but predominantly it's London market and US. And with a fair wind, we're hoping to hit over 20 customers in 2025. But principles remain the same: enable our customers to write better business faster.
That's a great way of just describing the story. And I mean, publicly funding £9 million a couple of years ago, and then 20 companies, it really gets you beyond that sort of crossing the chasm technology adoption curve people might be familiar with. You've gone beyond having a couple of clients that you knew and really proving you're actually moving into the mainstream. So yeah, congratulations on surviving and thriving in these difficult times and on mission for the vision.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, Matthew, but it's good.
So, yeah, we spoke to Andy a couple of years ago, and it'd be good just to catch up what's been happening at Send in that period that it should be highlighting.
We're getting into two big things in the AI space at the moment that are building on top of all of the other stuff that we just talked about. But the main two things are agentic workflow and AI enablement. I was reflecting on our journey with AI, Send's journey, since 2017. And I guess we've been live with AI since 2019. And generative AI obviously changed everything. AI was always, I say, prior to Gen AI, models took an awful lot of training. It was very expensive. It was quite a slow process, and the results were sometimes hit and miss. And, you know, the use cases were quite slim in terms of what you could use it for. Was also reflecting that kind of ChatGPT, it's been out for 3 years now, and a lot of people, when they first saw it, I guess everyone thought, like, goodness, everything's going to change, and an underwriter's life is going to change. I wonder how many, you know, underwriters' lives have truly changed in the last few years. I often see it as quite similar to the kind of blockchain journey around 8 years ago. You probably remember, Matthew. And I guess the two real similarities between both is both are they're technologies, they're not solutions. And I think when we know that we will have truly made great use of both of these great technologies, when they're working behind the scenes, making everyone's life easier, and users aren't really even aware that stuff is happening, it's just happening well behind. There was all of that stuff in the papers like this week about an AI button arriving in WhatsApp. A lot of software companies it's almost thinking, right, well, how can we include AI in our products? And I think Sender's always really been focused on solutions rather than kind of technology. And this is the exciting thing about the agentic workflow. We feel it's really kind of where the rubber meets the road.
Matt, I'm just going to jump in there because you made a comment about blockchain. And blockchain, initially, as you said, it was a technology looking for a solution, but actually I was slightly a bit skeptical. Whereas I think what's really intriguing with generative AI and AI, I think as I look at Send, is that you were around before you built a business in the insurance world. You knew the problem. You built a business using your more traditional AI, machine learning. To me, it seems you must have been, you were very well positioned when things like ChatGPT came out. It's like you knew what the problem was and somebody had given you a kind of powerful solution to work with it. To me, that's slightly different, I think, than the blockchain one. And then you mentioned agentic AI, so the use of agents, which I'd love to talk a bit more about, because that to me feels like the use of agents and multiple little big analysts going off, digital analysts going off to find the answer. Is that as big a step change as moving from traditional AI to generative AI, from generative AI now to agentic AI? I mean, it seems like you've got a scaling effect in there, but am I sort of slightly overstating the opportunity with agentic AI?
The AI models that you trained yourself, being able to switch to more generic models, the generative models that you don't have to train, absolutely, that was a far easier shift. The agentic AI, now that is almost looking at AI in a different way. So that's saying AI itself and saying, AI, especially generative AI, will change underwriting. It's quite a hard thing for everyone to get their heads round. I often think of it as like eating the elephant. Like, how do you eat an elephant? The answer is in small bites. And you can imagine AI agents as a small bite of that overall, solving smaller, distinct problems with AI in an overall business process.
So picking up on that analogy, if you've got a underwriter who's quite advanced in their career, kind of does things in a certain way, what is the sort of underwriting equivalent of eating that elephant step by step?
You can think of an underwriting process as something that even 20 years ago, companies were thinking, how can we make cost reductions and how can we scale our underwriting processes? And at the time, the way that they solved these problems was business process outsourcing and offshoring. And agentic AI, you can see that as very similar in many ways to that. So they weren't saying at the time when they were looking at those to move to BPO, to move everything in underwriting to BPO. What they were actually talking about was looking at the distinct tasks that could be picked up by someone that was lower cost, maybe without an awful lot of training and background in underwriting and insurance, and picking off those smaller bits and basically making those jobs quicker and cheaper with cheaper resources. Now, some of our customers at the moment, that are using those BPO services, what are they using them for? Well, an example of that might be triaging emails that are coming in with new business. And that is, especially if you're looking at businesses with high volume lines, there might be that 100, maybe thousands of these mails coming through. If you don't want to give those to a highly skilled underwriter, because they're going to be sifting through an awful lot of stuff and probably not focusing on the work that is really, really valuable to them. And I think that's the kind of key thing, that what we're doing is essentially, those customers are doing, is looking at the triage. They will outsource the bits of looking through, reading through all of those emails, working through what is in risk appetite, what they might be interested in, maybe prioritizing those emails into the submissions that actually we think that we should be picking up first because they look like really good business, and maybe some of the other ones that maybe are outside of appetite or not. And that is typically a job that is often outsourced. And the agentic AI movement is saying, well, actually, the stuff that you were outsourcing before, and now you've got these large language models, or you've got models that can actually read emails, get context from those emails, and then apply rules around those emails to say, oh, this one looks like a really good piece of business from a broker that always binds, or this one looks a bad piece of business from a broker that's often fishing for quotes. And that is a great example of an AI agent, which we have at the moment.
I'm very intrigued by your point there that your agent actually knows the performance of the broker, or I presume there's all sorts of things that actually, presumably the company themselves, maybe they're going out some third-party data, that they're actually informing their agents to make their agents more and more intelligent, effective. That's how it's working. So it's not just about the ability to read the emails and lack of format, but part of the skill sounds like what you're offering or what you're working with your clients on is how do you make the right decisions, and how do you keep staying ahead to keep making the right decisions and compete against your peers, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Those agents can only work based on data that they're aware of. And that's been a really big thing about Send and building out the Send data model, because it's made up of an awful lot of things across all different lines of business, across, bringing in claims data, premium data, all of these broker data, all of these things that might have an impact on decisioning. And broadly, like, it's all around there. AI is great and is probably, this has been the real step change of suddenly dealing with unstructured data. So, and this is data in emails and in attachments to emails. And obviously, if it can read through those attachments and the emails themselves to gain context of what the risk is about, to pick out these few different elements and then enhance those into like decisioning rules, essentially, to say, well, let's take auto renewals. If the risk itself meets a certain criteria, that if the customer have paid all of their premiums and maybe there's no claims, it can take a different route in the workflow to one that actually things have changed. So it's basically building in more and more of that kind of decisioning.
And so, of course, the challenge you've got is, there's such a massive explosion in the analytics available, in the power available, but the people building tools available to do this. How do you stay ahead of Send? And I guess as a related question is, how do you choose to buy versus build? Because what part of what you're offering is like competitive advantage because you've built it versus competitive advantage because you know the best solution to go and partner with or bring into your tools?
Yeah, I guess a big point to make about Send, and this was, a decision that we made from the very outset, is it's all about flexibility. So Send in itself can't be the best at everything. It can't know about all of the different data augmentations that you might need about a property risk. What it is designed to be is very flexible in terms of allowing our customers to choose best of breed data services. So for data augmentation, so let's say, in bulk, looking at property risk and getting all of the different factors about where those properties might live, but might be located, whether they might be in a wildfire zone or near the coast or whatever. And it allows our customers to choose different services that will serve them best. And the great thing is about it is that you don't necessarily just have to pick one service, because one data service for property might be amazing in one country, but it might be poorer in a different one. So the idea being is that not only can it work with lots of different data sets, but it can choose the right data augmentation service for that particular given risk or asset within the risk.
You're talking about users. How do you win over the underwriters? Because you're asking them to do something differently. I mean, you're asking them to trust to some extent in decision making when you come to triaging. How do you bring those underwriters with you? Because clearly that's a really important part of both getting into the business and then scaling within the clients you're working with.
Yeah, I think a big part of the journey of AI and just digitization in general, modernization of these insurance processes, it's a journey. Often people will focus on, actually, you need to be able to do the most complex issue, solve the most complex problems. But actually, it's taking a step back, because if you can solve 80% of the really easy problems, you've moved the net gain of the underwriting processes, slimming down that, hugely. Being able to, underwriting is an art, and it's all around not saying that you're going to get an AI agent to take over the art of underwriting. It's actually more around focusing on removing all of the boring bits that an underwriter might have to do. 70% plus of an underwriter's task or underwriter's working week is spent on non-value add tasks. Step one is chipping away at that 70%, because if they can focus their time on really looking at what they are very good at, it allows them 70% more capacity to write more business. And that's a really huge thing, removing the non-value add tasks for an underwriter and let them focus on what they're really good at.
But I also want to ask you a question about this, back to this adoption one. So I was around when email came out, and the speed with which people picked up email was extraordinary. I mean, people who were sort of 50s and 60s and had secretaries to do their memos for them were using email, and it was just overnight people could see the productivity benefit. Are you starting to see that now with? It's probably a broader question than just Send, but you're there putting this in front of underwriters. Are you seeing that when the underwriter sees what you're offering, and they go, "Crikey, I can now operate much more quickly, and I'm still using my underwriting skills, but I can just do much more"? Are we at that kind of moment now of adoption by people, or is there still quite a lot of education and convincing to do?
I think typically when an underwriter sees our platform, we give a demonstration, a lot of that is, oh wow, it can do that. It means I don't have to rekey something from one system to another, or I don't have to use my spreadsheet to do tracking of everything, because that is endemic across underwriting in general, is having loads and loads of tracker spreadsheets. And the problem is with that is you're missing out on huge amounts of data from that would benefit the organization as a whole. So it's bringing all of that into the platform, having a customer being able to look at the platform and saying, actually, I can see how automating this part of this particular process, or being able to see data that, that I don't have to log into 5 different systems to see the data that I need. We were chatting to a CEO of one of our customers recently. In fact, like we're invited in for them to present their strategy, which I think is an incredible way of working with a vendor, because it's really, actually, you can see what that customer is trying to achieve. And typically what they're trying to achieve wasn't just writing more business with more premium, it was writing business that is as profitable, or if not more profitable. The other thing that they said was the volume of submissions that they're getting. The early bird, quite simply, catches the worm, that if you can speed up the quoting process and get a quote out to the broker before anyone else, you will more often get the business than not. And that is key. Better business faster. If you can automate as much as you possibly can, get rid of the boring bits, allow underwriters to be underwriters and make the key decisions around the risks that they're writing and how they want to price them, but get rid of a lot of the stuff that slows down, you are going to win more business. And that is a big part of the value proposition of Send.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, it's partly the ability to respond quickly, but then it's also presumably the reputation you get as an underwriter to respond quickly so that people come to you. The whole thing is a sort of virtuous circle. Matt, what about data? I mean, I've been in this industry now at least 30 years, and right from the very beginning, people were talking about trying to get better data and access to data. You've talked a little bit about this in terms of some of the ways that underwriters can get access to more information, but how optimistic are you that we're starting to be able to really make progress? If insurers can just get access to data they've already got and give it to the underwriters, that would be a good starting point. But also, third-party data coming in.
I think just that point around having access to the data that they already have, like, that's huge. If your underwriters have got little spreadsheets that are squirreled away to do tracking or to work out the reasoning of why they wrote the risk, that data is very hard to get access to, especially to get access to at scale. So if you can move all of that data into a system that will encapsulate all of it, there, obviously it's displaying it to an underwriter, but it's also feeding all of that information into customers' data lakes or data warehouses where their own data scientists can use that data to maybe tweak their pricing or maybe change certain parts of different elements or even just to understand underwriting performance. You also mentioned that data augmentation part. So data augmentation is something that was very slow, typically in large commercial and specialty. And the reason is, you can imagine you putting in your home insurance quote, you might put in 10 bits of information and it will spit back a price. What our customers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis is being sent spreadsheets of maybe tens or even hundreds of thousands of properties, and they're saying, I need a price. You're not going to be able to get a really true, accurate price on that unless you augment the data and hit all of the data services in exactly the same way that your home insurance quote might be. But it's actually, you're doing that across 100,000 properties at the same time. Now, previously, typically it was done via BPO services. By the time that they'd worked out the data in order to truly establish the risk, they may have already written the risk a week ago because these processes took so long. If you could do that really, really quickly by hitting data services automatically, by using AI to take these unstructured data sources and then put the data into structured form where you could apply rules, this can be done very quickly. And obviously, if you've got all of the information at the time that you need in order to do the quote, you're not relying on kind of maybe some spot reinsurance to correct any mistakes or anything else. And that's really, that's big. Even just understanding so as you can quote better is a giant step forward.
Matt, is there anything we haven't talked about that we want to cover for today?
I guess in terms of what we're doing in this space. We like to think that we're working with the types of customer that really wants to use AI, that wants to use data, that is wanting to solve some of those easy problems as well as wanting to solve some of the more complex ones. That is really big to us. We want our customers to grow in a profitable way, and we want them to do that quicker than their competitors. If there's one thing that we're focusing on, it's to support our customers' evolution in this, because as you quite rightly say, AI is a big journey that we're all on at the moment, and it's keeping abreast of that is huge and super important.
And so for someone who's heard the story and is now all excited because they want to be able to reduce the 70% of inefficiencies in their business, see the dashboard or the analytics, what happens next?
There's ways of getting in contact via our website. But if anyone listening to this thinks, I'd like to speak to Matt, I'd love to hear about their problems in terms of that they're facing and the challenges that they're facing. As I said at the start, we're a growing company. We've now done this an awful lot of times. So there's been lots of lessons learned, and it would be great to pass that knowledge on. So as anyone that's just starting their journey in underwriting transformation can have the benefit of that.
I know one of your major clients now actually listened to the podcast we did with Andy, and he was so intrigued. He then did exactly that, contacted you, and is now a client. I certainly think you've painted a very compelling picture. And it's like all things, I think until people actually see it, if you don't quite understand all the applications, but it sounds like that's relatively straightforward. Contact you or go through the same website, and we'll put some links in the podcast. And then before I let you go, we are now doing our prediction for the next 12 months. So you're allowed one prediction, but if you were to come back in 12 months' time, what would you say would have changed?
I think the use of AI will obviously increase. I personally think the way of increasing it is via the agentic workflow. I think the agentic workflow is a term that people are going to hear more and more. I think things are going to change for business processes and the typical BPO operation. I think they're going to change. They'll pivot, I'm sure, to using AI where they're using people at the moment to do the kind of more simpler jobs. I think that things are going to start happening now. I feel as though that people have digested what they can do. They're going to talking about eating the elephant and doing it in bites. They're going to start chipping away and more, and it will happen quietly behind the scenes. But all of a sudden, you'll look at your process and you think, actually, there's an awful lot of this, the boring bits of this process, which are now being handled by AI. And I don't think that is going to be a big light switch moment. It'll be something that increases more and more. And I think over the next 12 months, that's going to happen more and more. So yeah, we'll see how much of a dent that we can make in those kind of boring, non-value add tasks.
Great. Well, with that, I'll let you get on with the rest of your Friday. And thanks for all your support with InsTech. And congratulations on the business. As I said, it's always great speaking to people that have founded a business and 8 years in are surviving and thriving.
Cheers, Matthew. It's been a real honour to be on here today. So thanks very much.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The InsTech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.